All right, hope you enjoyed the break. Let's go in our Bible to 1 Samuel chapter 1. 1 Samuel chapter 1. And really do appreciate everybody that's here. Appreciate people that take time off work and their holidays to make a contribution to all that's happening. 1 Samuel chapter 1. Excuse me. I was reading how a woman can potentially have 40 pregnancies in her life. Just relax, ladies. We live in the 2.2 generation where generally two parents, two children now. But as I was reading about this, I then was very curious to who'd ever had the most babies. And the mother of the most children is a lady called Valencia Vasilev. I forgive my pronunciation of her name, but she and her husband had 69 children. It was between 1725 and 1765. She had 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets, 4 sets of quadruplets, and she gave birth a total of 27 times. Now, I want to preach about being a mother today, but very specifically becoming a mother church. And I want to read from 1 Samuel, and this is the text where Hannah, who is married, and she has not become pregnant, she is barren, but she has wanted desperately to have a child. And I want to say up front, if there's a lady here today, you are married and perhaps you haven't been able to fall pregnant yet, I'm very mindful, very sensitive to that fact, but I do want to look at this subject from the Word of God. But there is a very deliberate spiritual connotation that I want us to see from our Bibles. Let's read from verse, excuse me, did everything to prevent having a horrible voice, but never mind. Verse 4, I'm going to read down to about verse 20, little longer, but just bear with me. It says, "And whenever the time came for Elkanah to make an offering, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it was year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, that she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then Elkanah her husband said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? So Hannah arose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. No razor shall come upon his head. And it happened as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. And then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you've asked of him. And she said, Let your maidservant find favour in your sight. So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Then they rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord, and returned and came to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And so it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked for him from the Lord. Now, I want to take a few moments, first of all, if you consider with me the uniqueness of a mother. Now, a woman's womb is what makes her so incredibly unique. That is the ability to bear and give birth to a child. The womb, or inside of a woman, it is this sanctuary where new life is to be nurtured. And this is one of the reasons why the whole controversy or the topic of gender choice is such a demonic ploy. I want to tell you that this subject runs much, much deeper than just being woke and just trying to be sensitive to people's feelings and, a little darling and a little snowflake, what they prefer to do in life. I want you to listen to me. It runs much deeper than that. It is profound. It is a deliberate demonic ploy because it's a reprehensible attack on God's creation of men and women. And it's far more profound than people realize. Because what the devil's done is he's muddied the waters of the brains of clear-thinking people. It's interesting, there's been a trace in the preaching already referencing to the mind and how people see or perceive things and how their minds are being shaped. But this is a subject that's so muddied by the devil. This is why Elton John, Ricky Martins of the world, they think they can bypass mothers. That, we'll just pay some money and we'll get this lady, she can have the baby, then we're going to get the kid back because that little kid doesn't really need a mother. What it needs is a couple of fathers. I want to tell you, that is wicked and that's demonic because men cannot be birth mothers. Why? Because they don't have a womb. Many, many decades, China had the one-child policy. And what was the prejudice of the two genders? It was the female. And if you know anything about the one-child policy, is that families, if they would have more than one, or if it was a girl and they knew it, they would often abort that child, abandon it, get rid of it because they wanted a boy. But of course, when you mess with God's creation as they did, they discovered in the last 20 years they got a mammoth problem on their hands, is there was no girls for the boys to marry. Because this is a demonic ploy. See, the womb is for nurturing and protecting and developing a baby. I've taken note already last night, today, there's a number of pregnant women here. And if you notice them, I want you to think about this sermon. There's a couple of ladies here. Some of you, I can tell you're 7 months. Some of you must be almost 9 months. Some of you wish you were at 9 months and you're almost there. But, when you see a pregnant lady, it's such an incredible thing. What makes her unique is her womb. And here is Hannah in our text. The cry of her heart was she wanted to be a mother. Verse 6, it says, miserable because the Lord had closed her womb. Because this is entrenched in a woman. That somewhere in a woman's soul is a desire to become a mother. It's very, very interesting that over the years of life, even my own older sister, I remember that she never had any interest in having children. She was never clucky, as you will. Some girls, they want to have babies. My sister wasn't one of those. I know you know many other women that are similar. Perhaps you were one of those. But it's extraordinary, though. Once they often become pregnant and give birth, they change completely. Now they're every bit the mother. That everything in them that is female, everything about them that's designed to be a mother, it all begins to kick in. And this might be more of a prolific desire in some women than others, but nonetheless it's in them. We have an account in the Old Testament where two prostitutes both had sons. They were asleep in the same house at night, their babies are with them. And one very, very sadly rolls onto the child, smothers the child dies, the mother realizes what's happened. So she takes her dead baby and she goes to the other sleeping mother and swaps the children. Places the dead child with the other woman, and of course, those of you who are familiar with your Bible know that the next morning, the woman who wakes up that has the dead baby, she realizes this is not even my child. She knows what's happened here. Immediately begins to protest. This becomes such a controversy. It comes before King Solomon. And King Solomon, this is where he displays his wisdom. He's got to come up with a solution. He says, listen, bring me a sword. What we're going to do, we'll just cut the baby that's alive in half and you can have half each. And immediately, the genuine mother of the baby that's alive says, no, don't do that, let her keep the baby. And Solomon knew straight away that's the real mother. Because this is something that is so unique about a lady. I asked quite a few different women as I was writing this, just different comments that I received back. And I was curious as a mum, various things. And here's a couple of comments that I heard back. One said, until you become a mum, you don't understand the love that you have for your kids. Another, I didn't expect to love as much as I did. It was a surprise. One of the mums that I asked who lost a child said, I learned so much about life and learned to love even more. See, babies are a blessing of God. Children are God's favour. In Psalm 127:3 it says, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. And in our text, Hannah is under no illusion. She knew that to become a mother was God's blessing. In verse 10 and 11, she was in bitterness of soul, prayed to the Lord, wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you'll indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. No razor shall come upon his head. Because there was something in this woman, there was something unique about a woman. She has a womb, everything about her is designed that she would potentially conceive and deliver a child. I was present for the birth of all four of my children. In fact, today's my son's birthday. He's the youngest. But I was there for every birth, starting off with Hayley, Catherine, Natalie, then Darcy. But I'll never forget when Hayley was born. This was in Darwin. And the doctor who delivered her had delivered my wife when she was born. And so he's off playing golf and basically said, look, just give us a call when it's nearly due sort of thing. I don't know, he's 6th hole, 7th hole at the course, and he kind of turns up at the last minute. He's all business as usual, got it done, no problem. There's the baby cut under the tongue. Harley's been talking ever since. But you know what? Something happened in me. Because for the next 2 weeks, any time I saw a mother with a little child, it was like, there's a mother. I never got it before as a bloke. I just didn't understand. But being present for the birth of those children, it changes something in you. You realise that a woman is so unique, that this is God's design for her. My wife has been with her 3 daughters, except for one baby because of all the new COVID rules, but she's been there with her daughters as they've given birth to their children. Because this is something that us men do. We don't have a part in this. Well, we kind of do, but that's the best bit, which is really why we really like women, but that's another sermon. We'll save that one for October. But listen, this is something. This is something that we will never properly comprehend. Now, with that thought in mind, I want to bring that to the spiritual and specifically to churches. And I want to talk about becoming mother churches. Because churches have got to become mothers of baby churches. And that means that you've got to build an atmosphere, an expectation of becoming a mother. You know, we have the deliberately on the brochure this year, the 3 prongs, the 3 statements of our fellowship, and, you know, evangelism, discipleship, church planting. If you go to a lot of our hip churches, they've kind of adjusted that, and it's got, you know, it's got this word and that word. It's kind of slightly, you know, modernised for you, but it's saying the same thing. And we deliberately put it on the brochure this time. And I think back to all the years I've been in ministry, and the Perth brochure would come out, or wherever it was from, and have the 3 things: evangelism, discipleship, church planting, and confession. I used to look at it and go, you know, look, we know that. Why, you know, couldn't we add like a nice, you know, scenery picture on the brochure? You know, we get the 3 things. We're kind of brainwashed. But let me tell you, it's got to go beyond a mantra. It has to be a conviction. Because this is our vision. This is what God did birth in where he has saved and placed you and I. This is his vision. And in the text, this was why Hannah was troubled, because she knew she had the potential to conceive. She knew she was designed to nurture and deliver a child, because Hannah had a womb. And I want to say to every pastor here, your church has a womb. God built that work. It is from his spirit. It is his DNA. And this is what churches have to have. They have to have a spiritual womb. And what that means is within the safety and the joy of that local church, it's where future babies are to be nurtured. I was saved in Darwin in 1987. And I realized in a very short time that I was called to be a preacher and even start a church. And you might say, well, yeah, that's pretty obvious because that's what you've done. Let me tell you, when you are a disciple in a church, it isn't that obvious. In fact, if anything, if you begin to entertain it, you actually get nervous. There's a sense of apprehension, almost to the point of fear, that you would be contemplating or considering this. Just like I'm sure there's young men here today, and as I've described that, you say, you know what, Pastor, that's exactly how I'm feeling. But I want to tell you, because I was in that congregation, it was such a healthy place to be, nobody told me that I was to do that. I knew it because I was in the spiritual womb. That's because it was a healthy spiritual womb in the Darwin church. And God saves me. Nobody witnessed to me. Nobody gave me a flyer. Nobody invited me to a concert. I'd never been in the building. I walked in on Sunday night, got born again, locked in, lived for God. I've been witnessed to by Baptist preachers. I'd heard Lutheran preachers. I'd heard preachers on the TV. One time I went into the city hall in Brisbane with an old farmer and his wife. I was stoned, listened to an international black evangelist from America. I was sitting up in the balcony when the altar call came. I sat on my hand because I knew I should be lifting it. But when it was God's time, he took me to that church in Darwin. I was sitting in a caravan on the edge of the bush, and God spoke to my heart, said, get up and drive to that building. I didn't even know it was a church. Walked in, got saved on Sunday night. Locked into that church. And I can't tell you exactly when it was, but it didn't take long when I began to realize I need to do what that man's doing. Because the church had a very healthy spiritual womb. I was reading an article about the womb, and it says the womb, scientists have discovered a virtual sensory playground in which your baby is living. The fetus responds to your voice and other sounds in the room, reacts to light and dark shadows as you move from place to place, tumbles as you switch positions, even tastes sweet or spicy foods you've just eaten. See, when I was in the womb of that church, what changed me was the outreaches, it was the revivals, it was the all-night prayer meetings, it was me getting involved in the drama team, it was the Sunday school that the pastor taught, and as I was in the womb of that congregation, God was beginning to birth, first of all conceive, and then get that baby to grow to eventually be delivered. Strathpine Church was birthed from the Scarborough Church in the 1980s. And it was a couple that came to Queensland. Their names were Gavin and Sue Anderson. When the church first began, it was in Fortitude Valley near the city. Eventually it moved to Stafford. Eventually it moved to Launton. It moved to Strathpine, where we're still residing today. But in 1989, it was the year that my wife and I got married, we came down to Brisbane for our honeymoon. Turned up to the church on Sunday morning. This is when Gavin and Sue Anderson were there. And I think the church was all of a massive amount of about 12 people. It was still in the valley then. I remember being moved and being impacted because I'm in a pioneer church. But let's fast forward the tape. That congregation grew and at one point gave birth to a baby called the Southport Church. It's where Pastor Mike Zapata is, who preached this morning. They relocated geographically a few years ago to Helensvale. But that church was planted by the Strathpine Church, a couple called Stuart and Ann Bremich. Another man had a little stint there called Tim Hughes. And then over 10 years ago, Mike Zapata and Holly went there. Done a wonderful job. And now in March this year, as he mentioned this morning, they've given birth to the baby, Pastor Dylan Stokes. I want you to join the dots today how this works. Prescott planted a church in Perth. Perth gave birth to a baby that came to Brisbane. Brisbane gave birth to a baby called Southport, or Helensvale now. And then Southport has given birth back to Southport. That is 4 generations. Today, we have right on the front row here, we've got Pastor Lenny, who we brought over from South Africa. The King Williamstown Church was planted by the Darwin Church. The King Williamstown Church has planted a church into Umdunsani. It is the second biggest location in South Africa between King Williamstown and East London. And the good-looking gentleman on the front row here in the corner, Pastor Lenny, is the pastor that has built that congregation. See, this has to come from the womb of a congregation. And it has to be supernaturally born in the heart of a pastor's soul. In Isaiah 54, listen to this verse 1. Sing, O barren, you have not borne. Break forth into singing and cry aloud. You have not laboured with child. And then it says, for more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married woman, says the Lord. You know what that verse is saying? Is the devil plants more babies than the kingdom. See, there's got to be, in the heart of a pastor, in his soul, there has to be a longing, a yearning, and this becomes a prayer petition. In our text, here's Hannah, 13 to 15. Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away. Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I've drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. You see, my brother, that's how you have to be. It has to be deep inside of you. It has to be troubling to the point of being disturbing. You say, Lord, you've got to give birth, Lord. You've got to bring from the womb of this congregation new life. You've got to produce a spiritual child, because becoming a mother permanently changes a woman. I could tell even as I'm listening, as Pastor Mike's preaching this morning, and I checked with him the other day. I think Dylan starts like next week. But I can tell how he's thinking already. He's already thinking, he's already concerned, he's already looking down the road. Why? Because there's a new baby that's born here. Because when you become a mother, it permanently changes a woman. Hormonally, her body changes. This begins to happen for months leading up to birth. And when a woman gives birth, it costs her. Her body is never the same again. Her hips, her breasts, physically, everything about her body. Once she's given birth to a child, there's no turning back. For the rest of her life, she's never the same again. Before I was saved, I used to breed working dogs. And there was one litter of pups that the mother called Sarah gave birth to. I was going to say the bitch, but then you'd all think I'm trying to rap or sing. So it's actually the technical name for a female dog. See, some of you are already embarrassed. You need to read more. Don't just read YouTube. You'll never learn anything. Anyway, Sarah gave birth to this litter of pups, and there was one that was just outstanding. She was a pearler. And she was so good, I remember deciding I'm not even going to sell her. I need to keep her like in proximity. So I gave her to a friend. I actually gave her away. And she was a beautiful dog, outstanding dog. When she was about 9 months old, And she's bred to leap in the air and grab cattle by the snout or the ear and not let go. She's about 9 months old. She lives out there in the Brisbane Valley up in the forest with this man. A mother cat died, had 2 kittens. And Bobby McGee, that was her name, never been with a male dog. She's never had pups. She made a full udder of milk and nursed those 2 kittens until they were mature enough to wean. She had the kittens up under the bed. If you tried to put your hand there, she'd tear your hand off. She's never had babies of her own because there's something in the female. This is God's design. Because how she views a baby is incomprehensible for a man. During COVID in 2020, our daughter, who lives with her husband and children in South Africa, came out to Australia. She was to give birth. She's come here to give birth to all of her children. Some of you I know are very familiar with this, but when she was about to give birth and she went into the hospital here in Brisbane, she discovered that 24 hours just before the baby was born, that the baby had passed away. It's called stillborn. And I was at home, we're in the lockdown, my son-in-law is there, Kerry rings me and says, you're going to have to go and talk to Adams and wake him up and tell him that the baby's died. It was a horrible day. This is in the morning. Catherine still had to go through the whole process of giving birth, knowing that her baby is already dead. And they brought the baby home to our house that night, about probably 7 o'clock I think it would have been, and the baby, the dead child, spent the night with our family at home, and they came and took the baby away the next morning, and a few days later we had the funeral in our lounge at home. But after Catherine's given birth and she's trying to process the loss of the child, I'd heard that sometimes when mothers hear their own baby cry, they begin to lactate and make milk because they're hormonally driven. And so I contacted Catherine just to check my details. She said, and I said, what happened there? She goes, no, Dad. She says, what it was. She says, whenever I would begin to think about Zara and begin to grieve, she said, I'd just start to produce milk. It's incredible. The child has already passed away. We're talking about weeks and weeks and weeks down the road. I want to play a voice message that she sent me because I didn't want to be unclear on the facts. And if you could just play that. This is my daughter telling me how it sort of happened.
After Zara was born, the doctors gave me a tablet that would prevent my milk supply from coming in. The tablet didn't work to the full extent of no milk coming in, but my milk just didn't come in its full force. So when a mother has had a baby and her milk supply has come in, then it's very common for her milk to start flowing when she hears a baby cry, especially if it's her own baby. The baby can be in another room, and if it starts to cry, or a baby even in the shops, then their brain registers that there's a baby crying and it starts to stimulate the milk flow. And I didn't experience that, but when I would think about Zara, especially in moments of deep anguish and grief after having her, even though I wasn't supposed to have a milk supply, in those moments of really thinking about her and mourning the loss of my baby, it was as though my brain knew that she wasn't with me, but my body hadn't made the connection yet. And so in those moments, my milk would just start to flow naturally in a response to thinking about my baby.
Now, there's the happy part of their lives is in the last year they came out to Australia again and had another baby, had a baby boy. The baby's incredibly healthy. His name's Christian, and they are now back in South Africa. But I hope that's not too close to the bone or sensitive for you. But the point that I'm trying to make is we need spiritual hormones in pastors and churches that are akin to mothers. The pastor, you've got to want your local congregation to become a mother. This is the blueprint of how fellowship became 3,000 churches. This was the heart of our founder and leader. This is what he understood from the very first couple that they released. And over the years, things have been refined and perhaps changed as we do it and try and be wiser and do it better. But listen, there is no perfect plan. This is why sometimes when couples have babies, they don't always plan it exactly. We're going to conceive on this night and how many weeks later? It's born on this particular day and we're going to have it in spring because that's when the weather's just pleasant. It's going to be just right and we'll get the baby bonus as well. Listen, in the real world, it doesn't always work like that. So let me talk about an abiding obsession. See, you've got to want this badly. This is Hannah, verse 10. She was in bitterness of soul, prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. This is talking about praying. This is talking about laying hold of God. The Amplified of that verse says, Hannah was greatly distressed. She prayed to the Lord, wept in anguish. Another translation, and she was troubled in her mind. Now, I am not promoting being overly emotional. We've got too much of a problem with that one. But there's got to be a godly anguish that's justified. There has to be something in the soul of the preacher. There has to be something in the heart of the pastor that says, God, you've got to do this. That we see the desperate plight of the world and agonize for more preachers. And I know this is not a popular subject, and I know it's easy to just avoid it. But we can't avoid it, people. There has to be a lamenting. We have to be distraught over the destruction and desperate people. They don't have help. They need help. They need the gospel. They need shepherds. They need someone to give them the opportunity that we've had. Does it not trouble you when you see so much need and so many opportunities to make a difference? You know, we just had in the Brisbane Valley just a week or two back a tragedy of a young man that's stabbed in the neck and falls dead on the ground. Tragic, 21 years of age. And his life is over like that. And you know what's so horrible about that account, beside the obvious tragedy, is people watched on and videoed it on their phones, and you don't see anybody running to his help. You don't see people racing in and grabbing him. You don't see people interceding to help. But no, we'll video and just put it up on the internet for people to look at because it's really interesting viewing. That's the coldness of where we're at. Do you not see the need? Do you not feel the pain and see the destruction on every side of us? And that is why the desire to be a mother, it might start out as a small desire, but it will grow. This is like Elijah when he prayed for rain, and at first he didn't see it. 1 Kings 18, he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. He went, looked, and said, there's nothing. And 7 times, isn't it interesting, it's God's number 7. Go again. And it came to pass the seventh time that he said, there is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising out of the sea. And he said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot, go down before the rain stops you. Listen, it might start off small. It might be a small thing. It might be just the seed of desire that you want to raise up a preacher. But listen to me, my brother. You've got to pray for this. You have to contend for this. You have to lament. You have to look on and say, you know what, God, that's what I want. I want to raise up a preacher. I want our congregation from its spiritual womb to give birth. The Bible says of Elijah in James 5, he was a man with a nature like ours. He prayed earnestly. And it's like Hannah who cried out to God for this. Verse 19, the Lord remembered her. Verse 20, Hannah conceived and bore a son, called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked for him from the Lord. You see, churches don't belong to us, and the people in them do not belong to us. They belong to Jesus. We are under shepherds. He is the great shepherd. We are simply managers. We are simply stewards. We are simply caretakers of who belongs to him. I thank God I had a pastor that saw the potential in me, the potential I did not see. Who was willing, though, to give me a chance. He's willing to let me have a crack at it. And to be truthful with you, it was probably more his self-belief in me than me and my own to why I did it. See, this has to be entrenched in the soul of every pastor, the yearning for a baby. And if we fail in this, we're going to fail in world evangelism. I don't mean to be critical, but I look at this outfit and this place that we rent this hall from. And you know what this is really? This is the shadow. This is the echo of something past that was amazing. I mean, how many years we use it and they still can't put a projector in? They still can't put a heater in. And what's it really about? Renting out powered sites to grey nomads. Man, if you gave me this piece of land, Brisbane would know about it. 2 Timothy 2:2, these things you've heard from our many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who'll be able to teach others also. These are disciples released, these are disciples relinquished, who can go out independently. And this is the vision and this is the responsibility that God has called us to. Romans 10:14. How then shall they call on him in whom they've not believed? How shall they believe in him of whom they've not heard? How shall they hear without a preacher? And then verse 15. How shall they hear unless they're sent? We know we've had Pastor Dax Veazey and his wife Rose and children in Bougainville for 18 months or so now. Do you know that in that nation of 300,000 people, there is one white missionary? In 2022, with our technology and all the wealth of the world. And what's the Christian church doing? Most of them will never heard of Bougainville. He's not going to reach 300,000 people. It's too big a task. We need to have 2 or 3 missionaries perhaps in Bougainville. But it's indicative of how the church is really not that concerned. And yet, I guarantee those people in Bougainville thank God that that couple's gone to live there. In Isaiah 52:7, how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who proclaims peace, who brings glad tidings of good things, who proclaims salvation. Think about it. Prescott planted Scarborough, Scarborough planted Brisbane, and Brisbane has planted Arawa, Bougainville. And let me tell you, we are hitting above our weight, people. It's costing our church a fortune every month. It costs nearly $100,000 just to get them there. But you know what? That's the vision. Would we rather have the money in the bank to play with? Absolutely. Would I rather have Dax and Rose here bringing 20 visitors to church a week? Absolutely. But I want to tell you, I know Bougainville needs them more than we need them. 300,000 people and 1 missionary. I want to bring a word of caution here as I bring this down. Because when a baby is left too long in the womb, the child can die. And all you mums know what I'm talking about here. This is sometimes what happens when a lady begins to get to the full term of a pregnancy. They monitor it so closely. Because when a baby is living inside of the womb, the umbilical cord is what joins the mother to the child, and it goes via the placenta. And this is where the life and the nourishment is coming from. But what happens is at the end of pregnancy, when a woman begins to reach full term, there's a risk that the placenta begins to die. It begins to separate away. And if this happens, the child can pass away. I've watched over the years men who were on fire, focused, wanted to do something for Jesus, but they were left and left and left in the womb. And I've watched them change, I've watched them turn, I've watched them begin to live differently. Now other things are their priority, now it's business, now it's houses, now it's children, now it's putting their kids into this, it's booking them in for that, and watch them change. And that's because they've begun to change in their perspective and their whole disposition because they've been too long in the womb. I like boiled eggs. It's taken me years to get it right, and I still don't. But often I'll say to my wife, you want boiled eggs this morning? And you bring the water to the boil, and then it's 3 minutes. And if you get them out just exactly the right time, the yolk will be cooked, but it'll still be a little bit runny. and you can dip your little bits of toast in it. But you know, sometimes I'm too slow to get it out of the water. And the big test is when I put the knife, oh no, it's gone hard. You know what? That's going to happen to disciples in churches. You know what? They've reached boiling point. They're ready. But they're left there. And where their heart was soft and malleable, it begins to harden. See, Hannah became a mother because she acknowledged then responsibility before God. 1 Samuel 1:25, then they slaughtered a bull, brought the child to Eli. She said, "Oh, my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition which I've asked of him. Therefore also have lent him to the Lord." Notice that, lent him to the Lord. And as long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord. So they worship the Lord there. Verse 28, the Amplified, therefore I've dedicated him to the Lord. Verse 28, CEV, I'm giving him to the Lord. Verse 28, CEB, so now I give this boy back to the Lord. Because as long as he lives, he's given to the Lord. You have 2 books of your Old Testament that record the impact of her baby's life. And it's the man Samuel. And Samuel is one of the most incredible people that you have in your Old Testament. He was the last judge and he was the first prophet. And one writer said of him, the universal reverence and love the nation had for Samuel is proven by the grief manifested at his death. Because it records in 1 Samuel 25, all Israel lamented him. You know something, Pastor? You could have, and perhaps not even now or yet, but a man who God is going to bring into your ministry that would be like Samuel. That could grow and be raised and mature and develop and end up being to a nation. Someone that nation would love so much that when he died, that the entire country would lament his death. And I want to urge you, I want to encourage you, I want to inspire you today. Make this your prayer. It's got to be, God, give me a son or I die. You know, it's interesting to me that Elkanah, typical bullfed bloke, us blokes are full of ego. She's not getting pregnant. He goes, oh, but aren't I like 10 sons, to you? No, you Wally. She got a womb here. She wants a baby. 10 sons, you're not like 10 sons to me. Just one son would be enough. My mother passed away in April, and I had the privilege of doing a funeral. I looked after her for many years. And I had to decide what goes on the plaque because she was cremated. And I troubled for many, many weeks over this. Not because, I can think of 1,000 great things to say about my mum. And I appreciate I got a brother and sister, and they're probably going to have an opinion about it, so I better think this one through carefully. So I did. And in the end, you're only allowed to have so many words. This is what I had put on a plaque. Had her name and the years that she'd lived. And then it says this caption, devoted wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. That's what you should want your church to become. A mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. And you know what? You'll die. But that church and that ministry and what you produce in your life is going to go on and live. God, make us have mother churches. Let's pray today. Bow our heads, close our eyes for a moment.